There was a time when the sun was not a star. It was a soul, alive, beating, yearning. Long before the first human name was whispered, before the winds chose a path, and the mountains had faces, a warm light curled itself around the belly of the sky. That light had the shape of a woman. Her name was Amaterasu, she who shines in the heavens. But she was not merely the goddess of the sun. She was the ache that stirs in the blood when the dark lingers too long. She was the longing to see, to touch, to awaken. She was the sensual heartbeat of the universe at the dawn of creation. From chaos, the gods were born. Izanagi and Izanami, primal lovers, shaped the islands of Japan with their union. But when Izanami fell into the underworld, Izanagi emerged broken. As he purified his soul in sacred waters, 3 divine beings emerged from his touch. From his left eye, light, Amaterasu. Her skin was molten gold, her lips the promise of dawn. From his right eye came the moon, her brother, Tsukuyomi, pale and distant. From his breath and nose, the wild storm, Susanoo, god of turmoil and raw desire. But it was Amaterasu who opened her eyes, and the heavens held their breath. The universe paused. She was the first beauty, the pure shape of longing. Amaterasu did not walk. She flowed. She drifted through the air like a flame unbothered by wind. Where her feet touched, flowers rose. Where her eyes fell, shadows vanished. The kami followed her, not in reverence, but entranced, because she wasn't just divine. She was everything a soul aches for. A warmth without demand, an intimacy that never wounds, a presence that undresses you without a single touch. The days began with her. Life's rhythm surrendered to her pulse. The world turned only to glimpse her dance. Yet even the brightest goddesses carry silence at their core, a golden fracture, a quiet hunger waiting to be filled. With Amaterasu's light, seasons found their rhythm. Snow grew shy, the ocean shimmered, time softened. Humans, born much later, would lift their eyes without knowing her name, but they loved her. They found her in the skin of their lovers, in the spark of fire beneath the pot, in the flush of cheeks after a dance. Love, in its gentlest form, carried her essence. That desire to touch without possession, to offer oneself without being consumed. She was that, a sacred distance, a warmth that gives without burning. But not all eyes can love the light. Some burn, some go blind, and some try to smother it. At the edges of her radiance, something stirred. Susanoo, god of storms, couldn't understand the stillness of her brilliance. He wanted to test it, to feel if her light could break under pressure or bend under desire. He didn't hate her. He craved her. Not as a man craves a woman, but as night craves day. A need to merge, to consume, to transform. But Amaterasu wasn't a flame to be devoured. She was light to be witnessed. And that drove him mad. Across time, her story was sung in temples, whispered in sacred rites, brushed into the skin of those who danced in her name. Priestesses wore her memory in white silk. Emperors called her their divine mother. Yet beyond all ceremony, her myth survived because we have all been her. We have all been light. We have all longed to be seen without being hurt. We have all wanted to reach out without being possessed, to be loved without being extinguished. Amaterasu is a mirror, not because she reflects, but because she reveals. And so her story begins, not with war, not with a cry, but with a golden whisper brushing the skin of the world. A goddess, a flame, a woman who became the sun. But even the brightest light can hide, and even the warmest heart close. What came next was not darkness, but longing unleashed, a brush of shadow, a dance between siblings, a trial for the soul of the sky. She was born of grief, and yet she became joy. From the salt of her father's tears came a goddess made of gold and breath. Amaterasu was not merely the sun, she was everything light means to the heart. She embodied balance, elegance, stillness. Her movements were sacred. She moved not to act, but to be. She governed the high plane of heaven, Takamagahara, a realm of gods and spirits where the air shimmered with devotion. Her presence was not enforced, but welcomed. She didn't command through might, she drew others in, with gentleness, with certainty, with the gravity of beauty. Her voice was low and clear, like wind through bamboo. Her smile could still a storm. But even in her warmth there was distance. She held herself apart, perhaps because she knew that even gods could be wounded. From Izanagi's right eye came the moon, Tsukuyomi, cool, composed, and quiet. He was Amaterasu's twin in many ways, but their souls moved in opposite rhythms. He watched. He reflected. He rarely spoke unless silence had already said too much. Where Amaterasu embodied presence, Tsukuyomi carried absence. He was the feeling of being looked at from afar, the glow on your skin that you can't quite trace. Some say they loved one another, others say they could not bear each other's essence. Light and shadow, forever turning in opposite skies, forever unable to meet without vanishing. He does not play a large role in what follows, but his silence surrounds the tale,
like night wrapping around a flame. Then came Susano, wild, untamed, aching with something he could not name. He did not emerge gently, he burst into being, all thunder and sea spray, born from the breath of a father in mourning. He ruled over the oceans, but he himself was a tide that never settled. His strength was unmatched, his rage unpredictable, but his sorrow was ancient. He was loud not because he was proud, but because he was lonely. Among the gods, he was the outcast, the sibling who did not glow but surged. He was not meant for calm skies. He was made for crashing waves, for winds that tear through forests, for desires that leave bruises. He did not understand Amaterasu, and that made her irresistible. She was the stillness he had never known, the light that didn't flinch, the silence he could not shake. And perhaps, deep inside, he wanted her to see him, to truly see him, not as the wild one, not as the unwanted, but as the storm aching for a place to rest. The three siblings were divine, but divinity does not mean harmony. Amaterasu lived in the heavens. Susano was drawn to the sea, to the raw places where creation is still in labor. And Tsukuyomi vanished into the moon's cold orbit, carrying his secrets beyond reach. There was tension in every meeting, an ancient pull, as if their souls remembered something deeper than myth, some forgotten union, some desire beyond words. Amaterasu tried to hold the balance. She offered Susano a place in the heavens, gave him rituals to calm his rage, honors to satisfy his pride. But he refused. Or perhaps he was unable. A storm cannot settle where the wind is still. He shouted, tore the clouds, cracked the earth with his fury, not to destroy, but to be heard. Still, the world saw only violence. Amaterasu watched, and something inside her began to tremble. Was this anger? Was it grief? Or was it something darker, something no god would admit to feeling? The ancients say the storm wanted to violate the sky, but the truth is more complex. Susano did not wish to conquer Amaterasu. He wanted to reach her, to shake her out of her unreachable grace, to test if even the sun could be touched, could be moved, could be made to feel something wild and real. He destroyed her rice fields, shattered sacred halls, and finally, in a fit of pain and madness, he desecrated her inner sanctum, not with lust, but with desperation, like a child screaming before the night. Amaterasu stood still. She did not rage. She did not cry. She simply turned away. And in that moment, the light of the world began to dim. There is no heartbreak greater than when the divine retreats, when something you thought eternal leaves. Amaterasu withdrew from the high plane of heaven, entered a dark cave hidden deep within the world, and closed the stone behind her. The world gasped, colors faded, harvests failed, even the gods grew cold, all because one woman, one goddess, refused to be touched without tenderness, to be called without care, to shine in a sky that no longer honored her. This was not yet the climax, not yet the salvation or the fall. This was only the moment the breath catches in the throat, the pause before the silence deepens. 3 siblings, 3 desires. One carried light, one chased it, one turned his face away. And in the space between them, the world hung in a stillness so complete it echoed.
When Amaterasu turned away, the world lost not just its sun, it lost its rhythm, its breath, its warmth. The skies darkened, seasons halted. Even the divine could not see their own hands. Fires did not burn. The sea groaned under frozen wind. Children of men wandered in confusion, not knowing why the rice would not grow, why the warmth had fled their skin, why dreams no longer glowed in sleep. The gods gathered, but without her light, their divinity paled. They whispered in confusion, but no whisper reached her cave. Amaterasu had vanished not only from sight, but from the heart of the world. She sat in stillness, surrounded by stone, wrapped in silence so deep it swallowed even thought. The stone walls held no warmth, but within her a fire smoldered, wounded. Wounded not by hate, but by the absence of tenderness. She had shone for all, loved without demand, given freely, and in return they had touched her without asking, entered sacred spaces with reckless hands, desecrated beauty with fury dressed as worship. She was not angry, not yet. She was hurt. That deep, wordless ache known only to those who have been seen but not understood. Meanwhile, Susanoo wandered the edges of heaven and sea, lost in the debris of his own storm. He had not meant for her to vanish. He had wanted a response, a crack in her serenity, a glimmer that his presence could move her. But what he had received was absence. She had left, not with fury, but with pain. And that pain echoed in him because he knew it. He had lived it, and now he had caused it. He tore at the sky with regret, but no wind could pull her back. He wept into the ocean, but the tide no longer spoke her name. In the heavens above and the realms below, the kami, gods, spirits, ancestors assembled. Without Amaterasu, they were dim echoes of themselves. And yet there was one thing left untouched: desire. Desire to bring her back, to see again, to feel again, to bask in the light that made life worth its weight. But it could not be forced. Light does not obey. It invites. It flutters toward joy. So the gods conspired not in dominance, but in art, in seduction, in ritual. If they could not pull her out with sorrow, they would coax her with laughter, with beauty, with longing reborn.
They gathered outside her sealed cave, a narrow, ancient crack in the mountain, its stones cold as loss. One by one the gods performed their arts, but it was Ame Ano Uzume, the goddess of dawn and delight, who stepped forward first. Naked but not vulnerable, bare but radiant, she climbed atop an overturned washtub and began to dance. Not a sacred dance, not a solemn prayer, but a dance of hips, of belly, of laughter that curved like moonlight across skin. The gods gasped, then roared, then laughed. She moved like water over skin, like breath between lovers, wild, foolish, free. And from inside the cave, a flicker stirred. Amaterasu heard it, laughter, joy, music. Even in her grief, she felt something stir beneath her ribs, curiosity, a twitch of desire, not to be worshipped, but to feel again. What could cause such mirth in the darkness she had left behind? Her fingertips glowed softly, not enough to be seen, but enough to touch the cave's walls with a golden sigh. And then a voice, low, gentle. Sister, come look. The world rejoices, and you are missing it. It was not a command, not a plea. It was an invitation, spoken by a god who once carved mirrors from lake water. They placed a mirror, polished and divine, before the cave's mouth, not to trap her, but to remind her. And slowly, cautiously, Amaterasu moved. She peeked out just enough for the light of her skin to shimmer in the shadows, and what she saw was herself. But not the goddess, not the symbol, not the sun. She saw the woman, the curve of cheek, the softness of her mouth, the ache in her golden eyes. She saw beauty, and for the first time in many ages, she desired it for herself, not as something to give, but something to feel, to savor. She stepped forward. The gods held their breath. The seal cracked. The world exhaled. With her return, light spilled across the heavens like honey. Crops stirred in their roots. Babies cried their first cries. The wind remembered how to dance. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was declaration enough. The gods rejoiced, but they did not crowd her. This time they honored distance. They praised not just her warmth, but her choice to shine again. And in her a quiet joy bloomed, not from being needed, but from being wanted. And Susanoo, he watched from afar, salt on his lips, regret heavy in his chest. She saw him. Their eyes met for only a heartbeat, but it was enough. No fury, no judgment, just understanding. Pain meets pain, not with answers, but with silence. She did not invite him. She did not banish him. She let the distance remain, and that, perhaps, was the most merciful act of all. And so the sun returned, but something had shifted. She no longer shone to be loved. She shone to be whole. And the world, having lost her once, learned to adore her without trying to claim her.
Amaterasu had returned, but light does not return unchanged. She had seen her reflection, not only in the mirror, but in the silence of her cave, in the hunger of the world, in the way joy tasted when it was her own. She had once shone out of duty, out of divine design. Now, she shone for herself. And that changed everything. The gods noticed it, the softness of her new silence, the way she walked, slower, more deliberate, as if claiming each moment like silk across skin. She no longer served the light. She was it, and it obeyed her. He came to her after many moons, not as a brother, not as a god, but as something humbled, something barely held together. He stood before her, his hair loose, his eyes hollow. He had washed himself in ritual, shaved his beard with a blade of obsidian, laid down his sword at her gate, and he waited. Not with arrogance, not with expectation, but with the stillness of a man who had destroyed something beautiful and knew he might never hold it again. She did not call for him, but she stepped down from her sky. Barefoot on dew-wet grass, she walked toward him without fanfare, without flame. He did not speak, neither did she. For a long time they simply stood, two forces once in collision, now suspended in something softer, something that might one day be called forgiveness. Her hand rose, slow as sunrise, and touched his chest, not to punish, not to comfort, but to feel. The storm had a heartbeat. It ached. It waited. It was human. He closed his eyes. The wind held its breath. Her fingers traced his collarbone, a path of light on skin once scarred by chaos. She did not flinch. Instead, she leaned in, not as a lover, not as a sister, but as a being curious about sorrow. Her lips hovered near his ear, and she whispered, "Why did you hurt me?" His answer was a tremble. "Because I thought pain would make you stay." Her breath caught, and then tears, not hers, his. There was no seduction. There was revelation. He dropped to his knees, forehead to the earth, a god undone. And she, golden, soft, resolute, touched his head, not to bless, but to hold. Time moved strangely then. The air thickened, colors deepened. Even the stars seemed to pulse closer. Around them, flowers bloomed out of season. The trees leaned in. The soil sighed beneath bare feet. And within that quiet, she offered him her hand, not out of mercy, but because even divinity longs to be witnessed by someone broken enough to understand it. They lay beneath the sacred pines, not in lust, not in romance, but in ritual, skin against skin, breath against breath. He held her like someone afraid to wake. She held him like someone anchoring the tide. His mouth never sought hers. Her thighs never opened in invitation. But their fingers, they danced, tracing the maps of each other's scars, following the edges where godhood ends and ache begins. She cupped his face. He kissed his wrist. And in that silence, they exchanged something deeper than forgiveness. They exchanged recognition. Later, when the moon had risen high, she rose and retrieved the sacred mirror. She placed it between them. She said, "Look, do you see yourself?" He hesitated, then nodded. She asked, "Do you see me?" His voice cracked. "Yes, and I am afraid." She smiled. "Then you are ready to worship." The moment was not about union, it was about reflection, about the courage to see beauty without devouring it, to desire without demanding, to approach the divine without needing to possess it. And in that moment, Amaterasu was no longer just the sun. She was the flame that flickers in the chest of every being who has ever wanted to be touched and understood. And Susanoo, storm that he was, became still. For the first time he rested, not in conquest, not in exile, but in awe. The next morning he left without words. She did not stop him. Some things are not meant to be claimed. Some closeness is meant only to happen once and echo forever. The earth awoke gently that day. The rice fields shimmered. The birds sang slower. The people who prayed felt something press behind their eyes. Not grief, not joy, but something deeper. Grace. Amaterasu stood at the edge of the sky, the mirror in one hand, the memory in the other. She did not look for him again. She did not need to. What mattered was not that he changed, but that he saw. And what mattered more was that she had remained herself, unbroken, unyielding, radiant.
The sun had returned, but not as it was. Now it did not blaze, it glowed, gentler, more intimate, more aware. Light spilled not from obligation, but from choice. The rice fields lifted their heads. Children woke laughing. Old men opened shutters with tears in their eyes, as if greeting an old love who had forgiven them. The sun warmed not only the skin, it warmed the heart, because they knew now what it was to lose her, and they would never forget it. The kami gathered again, but their eyes had changed. They no longer looked up in blind devotion. They bowed their heads with reverence that came not from hierarchy, but from awe. Amaterasu danced again, but this time in praise of a woman who had taught the heavens how to feel. The mirror, once used to coax, now hung at the heart of every shrine, not to trap the goddess, but to reflect back the soul of the one who looked into it. Worship became tenderness. Offerings became gratitude. And no one dared call her the sun without first whispering her name like a lover's sigh. Amaterasu, the one who chose to return. Susanoo did not stay. He walked the earth, barefoot and alone, learning how to hold destruction with gentler hands. He carved rivers where there was drought. He breathed wind into stagnant air. He wept beside widows and left offerings where no one watched. People feared him, but in secret they prayed for him too. Because everyone knows what it means to make a mistake that breaks someone beautiful, and everyone hopes they might still be forgiven. Even the storm learned to ask for permission, and once, in a quiet temple carved into the rock, a mirror caught his reflection. He bowed to it and left without speaking. Amaterasu stood alone at the threshold between heaven and earth. She had no need for temples. Her body had become one. The tides moved with her breath. The clouds parted when her eyes softened. The petals of the ume blossoms fell in rhythm with her silences. She had loved, she had withdrawn, she had returned, but she had not forgotten. There remained a space inside her, a cave untouched, where her solitude still lived. She visited it often, not to hide, but to rest, to remember that even the light deserves to be alone sometimes. Her skin shimmered, but now it shimmered with softness, like candlelight behind silk. She no longer needed to burn bright. She needed only to be seen, and that the world had learned to do. Not with grasping hands, not with chance and gold, but with quietness, with presence. Children smiled up at her and called her One-sama of the sky. Lovers kissed beneath her and felt blessed. Women lit fires in their homes and said her name as they stirred their soups, braided their daughters' hair, or touched their own bellies with awe. She had become something greater than a goddess. She had become a presence. Once on the spring equinox, when the moon rose in her exact mirror above the sea, she stood upon the waves. She remembered a hand on her chest, a voice broken by truth, a storm kneeling. She did not miss him. She did not long for him, but she honored what they had made together, a wound turned into wisdom. She lifted her hand toward the moon and whispered, "You were never mine, but I carried you anyway." The sea exhaled, the wind bowed, and her heart was light. Heaven did not grow louder, it grew quieter. There were fewer wars among the gods, fewer punishments, more rituals of joy, more songs about second chances. The balance between light and dark was no longer enforced, it was felt, embodied. Light gave way to shadow with tenderness. Night returned to day not with force, but with longing. And the people below, feeling this shift, began to mirror it. They stopped praying for power. They began praying for peace. They stopped fearing the dark. They lit candles within it. They began to understand that divinity was not might, but intimacy. Amaterasu rose each day not because she had to, but because she chose to. And that, in the end, made all the difference. She watched the world below like a lover watching someone sleep, not to protect, but to marvel. She no longer hid, she no longer ached. She was whole, and wholeness did not need witnesses, but she welcomed them. The sun was warm, the sky was deep, and the wind smelled like her name.
This is not just the story of a goddess. This is the story of a wound that learned to shine. Of a woman who walked away not in anger, but in preservation. Of a light that stopped giving until it was ready to be seen without being consumed. We call her Amaterasu, but in truth, she lives by many names. She is the smile we hide behind duty. She is the exhaustion we dress in silence. She is the beauty that refuses to burn for someone else. And she is the return, not to others, but to herself.
In every shrine that honors her, there is a mirror, not a statue, not an idol, just the silver face of stillness. And when you look into it, you do not see her, you see yourself, because that was always the point. Amaterasu did not return so we could worship her. She returned so we would remember how to worship ourselves, with reverence, with softness, with sovereignty. The divine is not out there, it is here, in skin, in breath. In every moment we say, I will not dim for you. There are many kinds of love. Some crash like storms. Some seduce like fire. Some whisper in the night and never knock. Susanoo's love was the kind that wounded. It wanted her brilliance, but could not hold it. And still he mattered, because sometimes even destruction has a role to play in awakening. But Amaterasu taught us something different. She taught us that love is not real if it asks you to vanish, that devotion must begin with yourself, that the brightest light is the one you turn inward before you offer it to another. Her return was not for him, not for them, not even for the world. It was for the part of her that refused to be forgotten. When she disappeared into the cave, the world panicked. The gods strategized, the people wept. But what no one asked was, what did she feel in there? Perhaps the stillness healed her. Perhaps the shadows sang to her. Perhaps she held herself the way no one ever had. We are taught to fear retreat, to keep shining even when it hurts, to burn for others even when we are cold inside. But the cave was sacred because it gave her back to herself. And when she emerged, she no longer glowed out of sacrifice, she glowed out of choice. Amaterasu didn't return to punish. She didn't rise with vengeance. She rose with clarity. She did not demand. She did not shout. She simply stepped back into the sky, and the world rearranged itself. That is power. Not domination, not noise, but presence so complete it changes everything without lifting a single finger. The myth may be Japanese, the goddess divine, but her truth, her essence, belongs to all of us. In every woman who has ever been too bright, too soft, too much, in every heart that has loved deeply, been hurt quietly, and chosen to heal without applause, in every soul that has stepped away, not to disappear, but to remember their own rhythm. Amaterasu lives there, not as a symbol, as a mirror. The sun rises every day, but not because it must, because it chooses to. And that is the lesson. You are not here to burn endlessly. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to shine when it feels right, to rest when it doesn't, to walk away when necessary, to return only when you are whole. Amaterasu teaches us that light is sacred because it knows when to withdraw, that beauty is strongest when it is not afraid to be unseen, that love begins not with surrender, but with remembrance. So if you ever feel the pull to hide, to disappear, to close your heart like a door, do not be ashamed. You are not weak. You are divine. You are a goddess in retreat, a storm in reflection, a mirror waiting to be wiped clean. And when you return, because you will return, you will not be the same. You will be softer, stronger, wiser. You will not rise for them. You will rise for you. And the world, whether ready or not, will rise to meet you.